The idyllic setting of Chico, California, a city known for its lush landscapes and vibrant community, was shattered in the summer of 2019 by a mystery that would grip the hearts of many. Savannah Page Gold, a bright and spirited 19-year-old, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a community desperate for her safe return. Her disappearance on July 22, 2019, marked the beginning of a harrowing investigation, one that would unravel a dark web of deceit, betrayal, and ultimately, a chilling murder charge. Savannah was last seen leaving her apartment complex, embarking on what seemed like an ordinary day, a day that would tragically become her last known moments of freedom. Savannah Gold was more than just a missing person. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young woman with dreams and aspirations. At 19, she was navigating the complexities of early adulthood, balancing her personal life with her pursuit of education and future endeavors. Friends and family described her as a kind, intelligent, and adventurous individual, someone who radiated a positive energy that drew people to her. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through her close-knit circle, igniting a frantic search effort that mobilized not only law enforcement, but also a compassionate community rallying together in hope. The initial hours and days following Savannah's disappearance were characterized by a whirlwind of activity. Investigators, working against the clock, canvassed her neighborhood, interviewed friends and acquaintances, and scoured social media for any clues that might shed light on her whereabouts. Every potential lead was meticulously followed, every piece of information carefully considered. The urgency of the situation was palpable. The longer Savannah remained missing, the slimmer the hope of finding her alive became. Her family's anguish was a constant presence, their pleas for her return echoing through the community and beyond. As the investigation deepened, certain individuals and relationships within Savannah's life began to draw closer scrutiny. Every person who had been in contact with her in the days leading up to her disappearance was considered a person of interest. This meticulous process is standard in missing person cases, where the initial focus is on gathering information and ruling out various scenarios, from voluntary departure to foul play. The complexity of tracing someone's movements and interactions in the digital age, while offering potential clues, also presents challenges in sifting through the vast amount of data. One individual who quickly became central to the investigation was Lee Rodart, a man with whom Savannah had a prior relationship. The nature of their connection and the circumstances surrounding their last interactions were crucial pieces of the puzzle. Investigators delved into Rodart's background, his relationship with Savannah, and his movements around the time of her disappearance. The investigation was a delicate balance of seeking information from potential witnesses and gathering evidence that could either clear individuals or point towards them as being involved in Savannah's vanishing. The early stages of the investigation were marked by a deep uncertainty. Was Savannah a victim of a random act of violence? Had she chosen to leave? Or was she in some form of danger orchestrated by someone she knew? These were the questions that haunted investigators and Savannah's loved ones. The efforts to locate her involved extensive searches of local parks, waterways, and any areas she was known to frequent. The community's involvement was immense, with volunteers organizing search parties and distributing missing person flyers, a testament to the collective hope for Savannah's safe return. The media also played a significant role in amplifying the public's awareness of Savannah's disappearance. News reports detailed her story, sharing her photograph, and appealing for any information that could lead to her whereabouts. This public attention, while crucial for generating leads, also added to the emotional burden on Savannah's family, as her story became a subject of widespread discussion. The hope was that the increased visibility would prompt someone with crucial information to come forward. As days turned into weeks, the initial hope of Savannah's safe return began to wane, replaced by a growing fear that something far more sinister had occurred. The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a potential homicide investigation. The focus intensified on uncovering what happened in the hours after Savannah was last seen, and the individuals who were closest to her became the primary subjects of intense scrutiny. The transition from searching for a living person to investigating a potential crime was a painful realization for all involved. The disappearance of Savannah Page Gold was not just a local event. It was a stark reminder of the vulnerability that can exist, even in seemingly safe communities. The questions surrounding her vanishing cast a shadow, prompting a deeper look into the relationships and circumstances that might have led to such a devastating outcome. The subsequent investigation would peel back layers of complexity, revealing a truth that was far more tragic than anyone could have initially imagined. As the days bled into weeks, the fervent hope for Savannah Page Gold's safe return began to dim, replaced by a gnawing dread that something far more sinister had befallen the vibrant 19-year-old. The missing person investigation, initially focused on locating Savannah, began to pivot, its trajectory darkening as evidence pointed towards foul play. Law enforcement agencies, working tirelessly, shifted their focus from a search and rescue operation to a full-blown homicide investigation. The initial optimism that had fueled community search parties and public appeals gradually gave way to a grim determination to uncover the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. The investigative team meticulously re-examined every detail, every witness statement, and every piece of potential evidence. They delved deeper into Savannah's life, seeking to understand her relationships, her routines, and any potential conflicts or issues that might have contributed to her disappearance. It's during these critical phases that individuals who had recent or significant interactions with the missing person come under the most intense scrutiny. In Savannah's case, this scrutiny inevitably led investigators to Lee Rodart, a former boyfriend whose connection to Savannah was a critical focal point. The relationship between Savannah Gold and Lee Rodart was complex and became a central element of the inquiry. Investigators sought to understand the dynamics of their past relationship, the nature of their most recent contact, and Rodart's alibi for the time of Savannah's disappearance. Establishing Rodart's whereabouts and activities on July 22, 2019 became a priority. Law enforcement agents began the painstaking process of interviewing him, seeking to reconcile his account with any corroborating evidence or witness testimonies. The objective was to either eliminate him as a suspect or to gather information that would further implicate him. The investigation intensified as authorities began to suspect that Rodart may have been involved in Savannah's disappearance. This suspicion often arises from inconsistencies in an individual's statements, a lack of a credible alibi, or information from witnesses that places them in proximity to the victim around the time of their vanishing. The process involves a careful accumulation of facts, piecing together a timeline of events, and identifying any anomalies that warrant further investigation. The goal is to build a comprehensive understanding of the victim's last known movements and interactions. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement began to uncover troubling details about Lee Rodart's past and his interactions with Savannah. Information gathered from friends, family members, and digital records started to paint a picture that raised serious concerns. The investigation wasn't just about finding Savannah, it was also about understanding the potential role of those closest to her in her disappearance. The transition from a missing person case to a murder investigation is often marked by the discovery of evidence that suggests the person is no longer alive and that their absence is the result of a criminal act. The painstaking work of forensics and digital analysis also played a crucial role. Investigators would have meticulously examined Savannah's phone records, social media activity, and any electronic devices she may have possessed. Similarly, Rodart's digital footprint would have been scrutinized for any communication or activity that might be relevant. This digital forensic work can often provide invaluable insights into a victim's last known contacts and the events leading up to their disappearance. The community, initially united in hope, began to grapple with the possibility that one of their own might be responsible for Savannah's fate. The emotional toll on Savannah's family was immense as they endured the agonizing wait for answers, their grief compounded by the growing fear that they would never see their daughter again. The public appeal for information continued, but now with a more somber tone, reflecting the grim reality that was slowly unfolding. The investigation's focus on Lee Rodart intensified as more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Law enforcement officers worked to build a case, gathering evidence that could potentially link him to Savannah's disappearance and, subsequently, her death. This often involves a combination of witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and the careful reconstruction of events. The aim is to establish a narrative of what happened, who was involved, and to gather sufficient evidence to support criminal charges. The chilling possibility that Savannah had been murdered and that her body might have been hidden loomed large over the investigation. The search for Savannah expanded, now encompassing areas where Rodart might have had access or where evidence could have been concealed. The transition from searching for a living person to seeking justice for a victim of homicide is a profound and heart-wrenching shift, demanding immense dedication and resilience from all involved. The unraveling of the truth behind Savannah's vanishing was proving to be a complex and deeply disturbing endeavor. As the investigation into Savannah Page Gold's disappearance intensified, the focus sharpened on Lee Rodart, whose evasiveness and inconsistencies began to raise significant red flags for law enforcement. The initial hope of finding Savannah alive was slowly being overshadowed by the grim reality that the investigation was increasingly pointing towards her murder. The painstaking work of gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing digital footprints began to construct a narrative that was both disturbing and deeply tragic, a narrative that increasingly implicated Rodart in Savannah's ultimate fate. The turning point in the investigation often comes with the discovery of definitive evidence that confirms foul play. In Savannah's case, this grim reality materialized with the discovery of her body. Authorities, following leads and analyzing information gathered during the investigation, located Savannah's remains in a remote area of Butte County. The exact location and the circumstances of the discovery were crucial for understanding the timeline of events and for gathering forensic evidence. This discovery transformed the case from a missing person investigation into a homicide investigation, with Lee Rodart now firmly at the center of the inquiry. The discovery of Savannah's body was a devastating blow to her family and the community, confirming their worst fears. However, it also provided investigators with critical physical evidence. Forensic analysis of the scene and Savannah's remains became paramount. Investigators meticulously examined the area for any clues that Rodart might have left behind, as well as any evidence that could shed light on the manner of Savannah's death. This forensic work is often a painstaking and time-consuming process, involving the collection of DNA, trace evidence, and any other materials that could link a suspect to the crime. Simultaneously, law enforcement continued to build their case against Lee Rodart. They meticulously compiled witness testimonies, including accounts from individuals who may have seen Rodart with Savannah or who had knowledge of their interactions. Digital evidence, such as phone records, text messages, and social media activity, became increasingly important in establishing communication, patterns, movements, and potential motives. The prosecution would look for any evidence that suggested premeditation, malice, or a clear intent to harm Savannah. The motive behind such a heinous act is often a crucial element in homicide investigations. While the initial focus is on establishing who committed the crime, understanding why they committed it can be vital for prosecution and for offering some semblance of explanation, however disturbing. In Savannah's case, investigators explored the complex dynamics of her past relationship with Rodart. Factors such as jealousy, control, or a volatile breakup could have played a role in escalating the situation to violence. The investigation delved into the nature of their relationship in the period leading up to Savannah's disappearance, seeking to uncover any evidence of conflict, threats, or possessiveness. As evidence mounted, Lee Rodart was arrested and charged in connection with Savannah Page Gold's murder. The arrest marked a significant development in the case, moving it from an investigative phase towards a legal battle for justice. The charges laid against Rodart would reflect the severity of the crime, likely including murder and potentially other related offenses depending on the specific evidence uncovered. The process of arrest and charging signifies that law enforcement believes they have sufficient probable cause to believe the suspect committed the crime. The announcement of Rodart's arrest brought a mixture of relief and sorrow to the community. Relief that progress was being made in finding answers, and sorrow for the tragic loss of Savannah's life. The evidence gathered, which likely included forensic findings from the discovery of Savannah's body, inconsistencies in Rodart's statements, and potentially witness accounts, formed the basis of the charges against him. The investigation was a testament to the persistence of law enforcement and the collective desire of the community to find justice for Savannah. The discovery of Savannah's body and the subsequent arrest of Lee Rodart were pivotal moments, transforming the narrative of a hopeful search into a tragic tale of murder. The evidence collected at this stage would be crucial for the upcoming legal proceedings, laying the groundwork for the prosecution to prove Rodart's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The journey towards justice for Savannah Page Gold was far from over, but the grim discovery had irrevocably shifted the course of the investigation. With Lee Rodart arrested and charged in the murder of Savannah Page Gold, the investigation transitioned into its next critical phase, the legal battle to secure a conviction. The evidence meticulously gathered by law enforcement, from the discovery of Savannah's body to forensic analysis and witness testimonies, formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. The courtroom became the arena where the truth of what happened on that fateful summer day in 2019 would be laid bare, and where Savannah's family would seek the justice they so desperately deserved. The prosecution's strategy would have focused on presenting a clear and compelling narrative of the events leading up to and following Savannah's death. This involved systematically outlining the timeline, establishing Lee Rodart's connection to Savannah, and demonstrating his motive and opportunity to commit the crime. Key pieces of evidence, such as forensic findings from the crime scene and Savannah's body, would have been presented to corroborate witness testimonies and Rodart's own statements, or lack thereof. The goal was to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Rodart was responsible for Savannah's murder. Witness testimony played a crucial role in the trial. Friends, family members, and acquaintances of both Savannah and Rodart would have been called to the stand to provide their accounts. These testimonies would have aimed to establish the nature of Savannah and Rodart's relationship, any conflicts or tensions that existed, and Rodart's behavior around the time of Savannah's disappearance. Eyewitness accounts, if any, that placed Rodart with Savannah or at a relevant location would have been particularly significant. The prosecution would work to present these witnesses in a credible light, while the defense would likely attempt to challenge their accounts or poke holes in their testimonies. Forensic evidence would have been a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. DNA analysis, trace evidence found at the crime scene or on Savannah's remains, and any evidence recovered from Rodart's person or property could have directly linked him to the murder. The way Savannah's body was disposed of, the nature of her injuries, and any defensive wounds would have provided critical insights into the attack and potentially identified Rodart as the perpetrator. The prosecution would rely on expert witnesses, such as forensic scientists and medical examiners, to explain the complex scientific evidence to the jury in an understandable manner. Lee Rodart's own statements and actions leading up to and following his arrest would also have been scrutinized. Inconsistencies in his alibi, his demeanor when questioned by investigators, or any attempts to conceal evidence could have been presented as indicators of guilt. The defense, on the other hand, would have likely attempted to create doubt about the prosecution's evidence. This could involve challenging the chain of custody of evidence, questioning the reliability of witnesses, or suggesting alternative theories of what might have happened to Savannah. The defense's primary objective is to show that the prosecution has not met its burden of proof. The trial would have been an emotionally charged event, particularly for Savannah's family, who were forced to relive the horrific details of her final moments. The courtroom would have been filled with the weight of their grief as they listened to the evidence presented. The prosecution's responsibility was not only to prove Rodart's guilt, but also to ensure that Savannah's story was told, honoring her memory and seeking justice for the life that was so cruelly taken. After hearing all the evidence, the jury would deliberate. This is a critical stage where they would weigh the facts presented by both the prosecution and the defense, considering the testimonies, forensic reports, and legal arguments. The standard of proof in a criminal trial is beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning the jury must be convinced of the defendant's guilt to a very high degree of certainty. Ultimately, the jury reached a verdict. Lee Rodart was found guilty of the murder of Savannah Page Gold. This verdict was a profound moment for Savannah's family, representing the culmination of a long and agonizing pursuit of justice. It was a legal acknowledgement of Rodart's responsibility for the crime and a step towards holding him accountable for his actions. The conviction provided a measure of closure, though the deep pain of Savannah's loss would undoubtedly remain. The legal process, though arduous, had served its purpose in seeking accountability for a life so tragically extinguished. The guilty verdict in the trial of Lee Rodart for the murder of Savannah Page Gold marked a significant turning point, yet it was the sentencing that would ultimately define the legal consequence of his actions. For Savannah's grieving family and the community of Chico, the sentencing hearing represented the final stage of the legal pursuit of justice, a moment to see accountability rendered for the brutal loss of a young life. The judge's decision would reflect the severity of Rodart's crime, the evidence presented, and the applicable laws, aiming to provide a sense of closure and finality to a case that had deeply impacted so many. Following the jury's conviction, the court proceeded to the sentencing phase. Prosecutors would have argued for the harshest possible penalty, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the murder, the violent means employed, and the devastating impact on Savannah's loved ones. They would have highlighted the brutality of the crime, the deliberate act of disposing of Savannah's body, and the overall depravity demonstrated by Rodart's actions. Victim impact statements, delivered by Savannah's family members, would have been a powerful component of this phase, offering a poignant and personal account of the profound loss they had endured and the lasting void left by her absence. These statements served to remind the court of the human cost of the crime. Lee Rodart, through his defense counsel, would have had the opportunity to present mitigating factors, though given the nature of the crime and the guilty verdict, the prospects for leniency were likely slim. The defense might have attempted to argue for specific sentencing guidelines or present any factors that could arguably reduce the severity of the punishment. However, the overwhelming evidence of guilt and the heinous nature of the murder would have weighed heavily against any such arguments. The judge, after considering all arguments, testimonies, and legal precedents, handed down the sentence. Lee Rodart was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence signifies that Rodart will spend the remainder of his natural life incarcerated, a severe punishment intended to incapacitate him from harming others again and to serve as a just retribution for the murder of Savannah Page Gold. The imposition of a life sentence without parole underscores the gravity of the crime and the legal system's commitment to holding perpetrators of such violent acts fully accountable. While the legal chapter of the case was now closed, the impact of Savannah's death continued to resonate. Her legacy, tragically defined by her untimely demise, began to be shaped by the efforts of her loved ones and the broader community's response. Savannah was remembered not just as a victim, but as a vibrant young woman whose life was full of promise. Her family and friends worked to ensure that her memory would live on, often through initiatives aimed at preventing similar tragedies. The case served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance in personal relationships and the need for robust support systems for young adults. Discussions surrounding the investigation and trial often touched upon the complexities of relationships, the signs of controlling or abusive behavior, and the critical need for individuals to trust their instincts and seek help if they feel unsafe. The community of Chico, having rallied together during the search and trial, continued to grapple with the aftermath, seeking ways to heal and to strengthen their collective sense of security. The tragedy highlighted the essential role of law enforcement in piecing together complex investigations, the dedication of prosecutors in seeking justice, and the importance of a functioning legal system. The meticulous work of the investigators, the perseverance of the prosecution, and the solemn duty of the jury all contributed to the eventual conviction and sentencing of Lee Rodart. This process, while painful, was a necessary step in acknowledging the truth and affirming the value of Savannah's life. Savannah Page Gold's story became a cautionary tale, a narrative that underscored the vulnerability of young people and the devastating consequences of violence. Her legacy, however, was not solely one of tragedy. It was also one of resilience, the resilience of her family and friends who navigated immense grief to seek justice, and the resilience of a community that came together in the face of adversity. The hope was that by sharing her story and learning from the lessons it presented, future tragedies could be averted, and that Savannah's memory would inspire a commitment to safety, compassion, and justice for all. Thank you for following along with this case. If you found this investigation into the disappearance and murder of Savannah Page Gold to be informative and moving, please consider liking this video, sharing it with others who are interested in true crime, and subscribing to our channel for more in-depth explorations of complex cases. Your support helps us continue to shed light on these stories and advocate for justice.